Everybody, okay, people want to stand, that's good. Probably you sit long enough. So, and we have Andreas Ziegler as well. So welcome again, Andreas. And we have Rachel Heyard from University of Zurich as well. And we have all the other presenters. So thanks. So I have a few questions, but let's see if we already have some starting questions maybe from the audience. If not, question? No, just standing. Okay, good. So I have, I mean, one question I was thinking more high level. I mean, so how bad is the situation? I mean, so I'm wondering, how did we make any progress, let's say in the last 20 years, because some people died or something like Daniel said, or I don't know. I mean, so did we make any progress compared to 20 years ago? For example, did the Swiss Reproducibility Network help? I mean, I don't know how old it is already. Did things get more conscious because of high dimensional data and all kinds of petabytes of bioinformatics data or not? Or like, so what's your feeling about the progress we made in the last 2 decades, I would say? And of course, there's different aspects like computational versus inferential and so on, reproducibility.
Well, I have seen some improvement. It's probably a combination of various things, various factors that have contributed to this improvement. I think that the fact that, you know, in every field, medicine or even magic, if you wish, you need to name something in order to start the process of healing and curing. And once the name reproducibility crisis has been out, then suddenly there was a mechanical increased awareness of the problem. So I have seen the change of habits even when I started being interested in this thing in 2013. The situation was really dramatic, and even a couple of months later was already improving. I could see with editorials, I could see more guidelines coming up, and the students who participated, who attended the courses, were already aware of the situation. So awareness is important. So I have seen some improvement myself, but there are still niches of resistance around. I can't explain that, but probably a cultural shift that is expected, and there is an entrenched culture of not doing anything. That is true, which is true. Yeah, I don't know if others have opinions.
Yeah, other comments?
I didn't see any p-value today. I think something's wrong.
I mean, I haven't been in research in the last 20 years. Like, it's only been like, I don't even know. Well, a couple of years. So I cannot really talk about how things have been 20 years ago. I do teach good research practices for like PhD students and postdocs. And I mean, I really love teaching these things to these like very motivated young people. So I believe the fact that actually, I mean, it's not a mandatory course. Okay, it's not booked out, unfortunately, but there are every semester quite a lot of students who are interested in this. So I think things are changing, especially bottom up, maybe not always top down. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that I'm very interested in everything which is research evaluation, how we evaluate research for funders, universities, for hiring, etc. And their reproducibility, open science is becoming more and more a topic. So yeah, I guess it will take time, but I am very positive about the future. I think I have to be as a postdoc, as like a limited contract and everything. But I believe things are changing. That's at least my impression. I wouldn't be too negative.
Okay, thanks. Other opinions?
I think my first answer would be simply major changes over the past 30 years. That would be the first one. But I would like to give a little bit more expanded answer to your simpler question. And this is when it comes to computational reproducibility, I would say that's absolutely amazing what can be done nowadays. When I think about, let's say, when did we start with the virtual machines? It was about roughly 20 years back in time. I know that the first computers were properly running with virtual machines on it to make the code reproducible about 17, 18 years back in time when I was in Lübeck. So it was that time when we started with it. One of the major steps was the availability of RStudio for us. And with this, we were able to write the code plus have text descriptions and even do the definitions and the whole thing in a simple document. And in these old days, it was based on LaTeX and it was PDF. And to convert the whole thing into doc files, it was a disaster. This can now easily be done when you just think about the newest development, Quarto. You can even generate your PowerPoints, you can generate your doc files, you can generate your HTML files. If you do the proper coding, I think that's absolutely amazing. The other part is, and this is why I say it's a little bit more tricky, is it used in real life? And I primarily read work related to medicine, to clinical trials, to machine learning used in medicine there. Sometimes I would say we probably need more funerals. It's a constant business, and well, I will probably die out quite early that way because I'm one of the oldest here in the room. But the main point is it's not only that the code is missing, it's a lack of methodology description, and this is probably my biggest concern these days. I would say that most papers can't be reproduced, or most work can't be reproduced. If you get the data, you can't do it because the method description is lacking and no code is available. And that's my biggest concern these days.
Yeah, it's definitely improving. I mean, if I look at pharma, the fact that, Daniel, you know about this, is almost open source or R change, going from proprietary languages like SAS to R. I think that's a revolution in pharma. And to me, I'm really surprised by it. You now have teams across different private companies working together openly. That to me is a huge change. I agree from the methodology side. I don't think there's a problem in terms of computation reproducibility. The tools are there. What I'm concerned about is just sitting down and writing down, why are you doing this analysis and what do we plan to see and what is a clear method? If you don't have that, computational reproducibility is meaningless. And that's not very, I think there's a huge gap there, particularly when you say machine learning, etc. The biggest gap is you have people that are very enthusiastic trying to do this work. We can use our new latest models, but they don't have the research background. That's the biggest gap I see.
Maybe a follow-up question. I personally haven't seen the term reproducibility in Roche, for example, for a long time. On the other hand, I'm stumbling across AI, generative AI, LLM, GPT every day. So I'm just wondering, so maybe in terms of marketing this whole reproducibility, because I think it's much more important than maybe some of the LLM stuff that is being tried out. Like, is like, what could be maybe like an opportunity there to kind of sell it in some sense or connect it to this whole hype about generative AI? I mean, I think we heard a little bit about it, but any more ideas on that? Because I think as soon as you put AI nowadays into anything, everybody's crazy about it. But I think if we just put reproducibility, I don't think people will really care too much about it, honestly. So any ideas about that, or maybe any feelings about how this connects to the whole hype about generative AI?
I mean, without reproducible methods and fair data, you won't have AI. I mean, there are a handful of entities on this planet that can do AI on their own because they simply are that large. That's the hyperscalers, that's maybe a couple of governments. They can do AI because they have access. Either they just take the data from their citizens because they don't care, or they have done very good GTCs. But if we in research and also in private research and development want to use AI, we need to find ways to share the data, to make it interoperable. Sharing is not, I don't say open, because I work in the health, so I say fair. So it is in theory accessible. But also the methods need to be reproducible, otherwise we won't have AI. AI needs data. 15 billion websites or documents were fed into ChatGPT 2, you know? So that's, yeah.
One thing I would say is I'm worried about the garbage in, garbage out. So if you're doing AI or you're using ChatGPT to help you do some remedial tasks, that's fine, the risks are low. If you're doing this for scientific research, there's huge risks there. And you know that the quality of a lot of this research is poor. You're just throwing this into these kind of, I don't know, like databases, and then you're using this for research. I think this is highly dangerous. And my PhD was in information retrieval. This was the topic. So you know fine well what the problems are here. And maybe just the colleagues that work for Joanna sitting there, we thought about this from a different point of view where we talked about data standards for results and having all the documentation in place there. That's not sexy work, but it's fundamental work as well. And like how, I mean, when you talk about sharing data, why am I saying about data standards? Instead of stripping publications, stripping the tables out, thinking about how many errors can be introduced from like going from a PDF to a database to like a ChatGPT. If you have data standards in place where data can be then merged together, you can do more fundamental work here. And I think the next generation of generative AI could be good if you have the kind of foundation in place. At the moment, it's just garbage.
There was, yeah. And by the way, online, if you have any comments, feel free to put in the chat. There's one comment about maybe we can sneak reproducibility in via explainability or grounding. And also feel free to unmute yourself if you have any comments or questions. And of course, in the room, if you have any comments or thoughts, just raise your hand and then I will come to you.
Maybe I just give my one answer. I'm not sure you are right with the media hype that we don't see, because I think this hype has been like 8 years ago or 10 years ago with the examples I showed you, and I'm not sure it was a media hype, because I think that science is uncertain or that science is unreliable. Everybody knows that science is unreliable. Actually, when I talk to some parents or so, children's, whatever, Kinder, wie heißt das, Elternabend, parents evening, and I come with a scientists say, then people start laughing. I don't know whether you experienced this. My impression is that people know that science, that it's just fairy tales. And maybe this changed a bit with the Corona crisis. I'm not sure, because I think things change. I don't know how you experience that, but people now know what a preprint is, and that so today's news from science are maybe not reliable. I think we are on the press. I'm just not sure it's about reproducibility, because the word is so tricky. In German, it's reproducibility. I think that's just a killer. And often it's very simple things. And also it's not really news. So because, and last story, then I stopped talking. I had a meeting with the deans of the University of Basel via Zoom, and I had to explain them. This is not recorded, I guess. Huh? I had to explain them what the Swiss reproducibility network is. That's okay. I'm not going to. Not going to mention names. So I gave them a talk of about 5 minutes about the Swiss reproducibility network, and then one of the guys started laughing and said, "Science in itself is defined by being reproducible. Why do we need a reproducibility network?" And this was a dean. So I think it's really so that contradicts completely what I said before. Maybe the broader public knows that we are unreliable, but maybe we ourselves and our deans don't know. And I don't know the solution for that.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
I think one of you said, maybe it was Daniel, having good coding skills, programming skills is like a a method to be more reproducible. I think that's what you said. It was really echoey. But do you think it, like, I mean, building on Rachel's point, are we really having a more positive future? We're going to have one because the graduates today know nothing but Git and R, for example, because I don't see the difference. And speaking to people in my organization, the younger generation don't care that they're called data scientists, but the older, they kind of pick on it and be like, no, 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 I'm a statistician. Just thoughts.
Yes. I'm not. Yes, yes. I mean, that's sort of what I'm trying to say, that handling computational tools is becoming a mainstay, and it is already a mainstay with the younger generation. And there is maybe some resistance, but it's usually coming from either older generation or top levels, which is often the same thing. But I mean, they can have. 20 years ago, nobody would have been able to handle a smartphone. Nowadays, our toddlers can almost do it better than us, you know? So the computational, it's just simply a skill set. We need to train it. We must be, what also Mark said, and what also you somehow alluded to when you said the young ones know everything about Git and R, but they maybe don't know about what is an important question to ask, you know? We must find a way to teach them the important computational skills while not sacrificing epistemology or at least methodology. So same opinion.
Maybe one more question I had when listening today. I think quite often there was the feeling that the whole publishing process with the papers and so on maybe no longer fits really into the time. Or I mean, the question is really, are we even advancing science at all with the current publishing process, right? So for example, I mean, just digressing a little bit very quickly into this AI topic, I saw something shared on LinkedIn or something, that there was a paper published and somebody forgot to remove this kind of ChatGPT prompt from it, right? So it says like, yeah, sure, here is an introduction for your paper, and then it continued, right? And then apparently nobody from the journal editors saw this, nobody really noticed, and stuff like that. I mean, I'm even wondering, I mean, who is even reading those papers anymore? It's difficult to find reviewers for papers. I hear this more and more. So what, like, how do you see this whole kind of publishing process? Which maybe, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 years ago, maybe it was all fine because anyway, everything was printed. Now, I don't know, maybe the world has changed, but the process hasn't changed. I don't know.
Of course, all the questions and the issues we have developed here that are constant discussions in the reproducibility world, they extend way beyond researchers. It's the entire process of producing science from research, from publishing, from editorial activities, from reviewing, etc. It's an entire universe, and it's an entire ecosystem of things that should change. It's funny because I also I coordinate two elective courses at the Faculty of Medicine in Lausanne about AI in medicine, and it's all these examples of papers that still contain these references from ChatGPT. They are both laughable, and then you realize that they are reality. But they probably highlight the fact that only some, I will always be optimistic, some editors and some publishers are very, very low in quality. I wouldn't like to shoot at the ambulance, but the one that has been constantly pointed at is MDPI. MDPI concentrates 80% of all publication frauds worldwide. So it's been published, it's been shown, they keep publishing, they keep, all these examples come from them, usually. Not all, but most of them. But yes, we tried to implement lectures and statistical lectures and lecture series for researchers specifically involved in reviewing, for editors as well. They never participate, they never register. Nobody registers for that. So it's very, very difficult to touch this specific population of research, of scholars that are involved in the editorial process itself. It's very complicated. Now, definitely in some examples, it's obvious that the peer reviewing and the editorial process is broken, as you say. I don't know if you are active on PubPeer, for example. I am active on PubPeer. It's once you start trying to find frauds and duplicated data, you find them everywhere. So you stop because it's depressing, and then you start again because it's your duty. But it's there is something that is broken. I don't have the solution, obviously, but yes, there is a more broad aspect of reproducibility that should be tackled way beyond the simple education of authors and guidelines and so on and so forth. Yeah.
I can try to answer with a non-answer. I think it's a kind of a systematic problem of how like research works, academia works, peer review works. And I mean, the problem is, in my opinion, that researchers are like doing the peer review process or being peer reviewers, but they're not incentivized for this, so they're not getting anything out of it. And then they're definitely not trained. So again, like talking from my experiences as like teaching reproducible research, etc., then I hear often that like I'm doing this to non-statisticians, so they're doing quantitative research, empirical research, but are not trained as statisticians, and they are then really like scared, like how am I an expert enough to challenge anything that somebody wrote in a paper that is probably way more experienced than I am. Then they might not even comment on the sample size calculation because they don't feel like they're expert enough, and not recalculate it, etc., and then not find an error. So that's definitely a problem. And I did start a project now to try and actually help like train early career researchers to do review. So I was very interested that you already have something, so I might chat to you later, to again start at the root with early career researchers, because what we've also seen, especially in the pandemic, is that there were so many papers, but not enough peer reviewers. And then what often PIs did was to then just give the paper to their master student or their PhD student to review it. And yeah, I mean, it's not their fault, but they're not so experienced, so they might miss things. And because this is kind of unavoidable with the amount of papers that are being submitted, and there's just not enough researchers, we just have to start training peer review as another course that you should have. Like if you want to do a PhD, these are the skills that you need. And I think this is an essential skill for a researcher to know what to look out for when you're trying to review a paper.
Oh, there's a computer back. Yeah, let me bring you the microphone.
It's more a remark than a question because I haven't been able to completely articulate it. But one feeling I have on why the reproducibility principles and the good data practice principles are not maybe picked up as much as we would hope is maybe the fact that research and evidence generation doesn't boil down to a process, doesn't boil down to a very systematic, almost bureaucratic approach to things. There's one part of research, which is probably the one that creates the hypes and is the shiny and glamorous one, which is the discovery, the intuition, the fact that by chance the apple falls on your head and then all of a sudden you understand gravity. That's what people see, want to see, but that's also reality in research, right? Innovation and discovery comes from things that are not systematic. And the question is, how do you articulate this part or give the right space to this part into what needs to be a very systematic, robust approach to things, right? So I don't have the answer. I'm not even sure it's a question, but I feel that there's something here in how reproducibility is valued and considered with respect to how science is perceived, right? And at least one answer I give to myself is the fact that statistical thinking or critical thinking or the intellectual activity to find out what could be wrong or what could be misinterpreted, what could be a misleading thing, is as much fun as the discovery part or the intuitive part. It has a lot of intuition in it as well, right? Then it goes into the documentation, the systematic approach and all this, but that's almost a consequence. It's not the heart of the activity to do good science. The heart of the activity is really the mindset and the thinking, I think, right? So I don't know if this makes a lot of sense, but yeah, that's a perception I had from today. But thanks a lot, by the way. Really good session.
I can start with a maybe answer or to your maybe question. What I understood, what your problem is it maybe related to just exploratory versus confirmatory research, where confirmatory research should be very structured. You have an idea and then you have a plan and then you collect your data, etc. While exploratory research is more is like an apple falls and you come up with an idea that you then confirm. Kind of, I see it as a two-step thing, or like this circle that is also often shown. Like you find, you do an exploratory research, you have your data set, you find something, and then you go about and start a new experiment to answer this or check if it's really true or if it was just a false positive. And then after this experiment, you can then again start exploring, and like it's kind of a circle of research. I don't know if somebody wants.
I agree with you up until a point, but then when you find something, discover it, and you use a p-value, it's almost like you switch it into a confirmatory answer. And that's the problem with science. This is what we're talking about today. So if you don't have a structure, and this is the complaint that I've had as bureaucratic, if you don't have a structure, and there's so much work from, I think, Daniel Kahneman and Tversky, they talked about all the kind of biases that you have in research. If you don't have a workflow, you're going to be open to so many different biases, unconscious, you have fraud, you need structure, even in explore. And I know what you're getting at, but that's this paradox. It's a lot harder to do the exploratory part.
No, I think you were hoping for structure properly, which is what happens when you have more and more complex data. I mean, intuition is much harder to get just because what you deal with is beyond what you can even absorb, right? So it's the question is, how do you still enable the spark or what needs to take place when different disciplines talk to each other and all of a sudden an idea comes up and that idea is imperfect, maybe completely wrong, and you want to sort it out very quickly to be wrong. You want to go back to the structure, but then it's still part of the exploratory process, right? So exploratory process needs to be structured, but needs also to give space to this, and it's more and more difficult with what we handle.
I understand now. All I would mean is then, I think the issue here that maybe I'm pointing at is the publication process is to then get the awards and the promotion. This exploratory part is quickly switched into confirmatory. That's the bit I'm a bit concerned about.
Just to answer your question, maybe that's so structured exploratory research. Maybe that's what my colleagues and I in this building do all the time, because we do completely exploratory research, as I tried to tell you, but we do this in a structured way. And so we have our laser lights just testing around in the area. And then we think it's confirmatory, although do we really think that? I don't know. So maybe that's a rescue, because often people tell me, what are you talking about? Science is working since centuries. I mean, we have those things, we have a computer, all those things. We have the drugs that you develop here and there. Some of them are working. And so that's very kind of you. So, I mean, and we waste tons of billions of dollars, euros, of course, because science is not really reproducible. But in the end, in the long run, maybe we need this this waste of money to have the people the ability to just scan around a bit and being exploratory. I don't know.
Well, it probably boils down also to we all started to do science probably to maybe to be involved in paradigm shifts, so to be do some exciting science. But as Thomas Kuhn defined, when he defined paradigm shift in the 60s, he also said that the immense majority of researchers would be involved in simply a steady state increase in knowledge. And sometimes there would be some bumps of paradigm shifts. And we must realize very early that being involved in this steady state increase of science is as exciting as paradigm shift. And it includes a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of verification, quality check, just like, I don't know, being involved in doing in the sport industry. It's as exciting as performing records, new records. It's just as exciting as that to be involved in, I don't know, doping research or improving just the small performance of young athletes. It's as exciting as having new records. It's the same kind of spirit, and that's that's probably the driving force that is burning inside, probably.
Sorry, was there a question? Yeah, good.
Yeah, thanks. Not really a question, more a comment on this sense. I think for me, one of the main things is, I mean, Mark, you mentioned it took you time, and I think everyone went through the process to understand that what I studied when I was a student was probably not completely right, and I need to understand what the real questions are and everything. And I think also here with this comment, for me, a lot of the issue is interdisciplinary work together, because we're statisticians. We're sitting here now, many statisticians. I'm really happy to see Valentin and you that come from different areas, and my background is also slightly different. If we statisticians talk and say, hey, we're the responsible scientists in the room because we know what we don't know, but we don't talk to the medical doctors or to the biologists or developers, whatever, then we also have a problem because they're not trained in science sometimes. I see this when I talk to doctors in my role. We talked about it just before. Doctors, sometimes they're not trained as scientists. So we are the ones that need to support them in challenging in critical thinking and bring us this aspect of things. But obviously we cannot develop or know what the precise best question is for the medical aspect. So I think a lot of this is indeed, and I think the examples were given before also, that now we talked about whether or not there's advancement. Novartis and Roche and use-R and all these kind of consortiums or collaborations that are happening also between companies that have financial conflicts, theoretically. I think there is place to advance in this way, but it does need collaboration from different collaborators, different scientists, different disciplines as well. And I think that's where, and that's also for me, one of the things that was really important before is indeed transparency. I think transparency and communication is simply key. If we're not transparent on what we're doing, then we'll never go anywhere.
I have maybe one more question. Why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to enforce some of this best practices? Like, and I think, because I'm also seeing that internally, for example, in a company. I mean, I think we're definitely making good progress. So we're slowly switching from SAS to R and stuff like that, using Git and so on. So definitely some progress. But on the other hand, we are still like probably 10 or 10 or 20 years behind what is actually possible with things like workflow management everywhere, being able to find the code for stuff that has been done, being able to execute the code again, and so on. And similarly, we heard in some of the presentations, I mean, we have all of these guidelines and best practices for writing statistical method sections, for example, right? I mean, I don't know. So what is, I'm just wondering more, is it like a human thing that we just try to be lazy all the time and sneak around and or, like, do we need to have some dictator, some benevolent dictator on the top who dictates all of this? Or like, I don't know. I'm just wondering, why is it so hard because even myself, maybe sometimes, to be honest, maybe sometimes I also know, okay, this is maybe not the right way, but yeah, but I just do it quickly, like this. It's just this and that, but so what is behind this this kind of conflict?
It's probably a very complex question. Otherwise, we would have the solution already, probably. But I think it's a matter of incentives and threats, probably partly. In medicine, reproducibility has been there for a long time, because if you endanger patients during clinical trials, you may go to jail. Threats. In industry, I am not from industry, but in industry, reproducibility is one cornerstone for keeping your partnerships and making money. You need to have standards. In academia, if you cheat or if you don't do the right thing, if you publish, what's going to happen? Not really much. Even if somebody finds out that you've been publishing 10 years of false research, not much will happen, actually. So, but the incentive exists, publishing to get tenured, etc., etc. So I think that's what's one part of the problem. But I'm not a social scientist. I'm not from humanities, so probably they would have another vision of the society. But that's my vision from inside. I don't know if others have other opinions.
Oh, great. Maybe have some psychologists here.
Not so much about humans, no. My background is in psychology, but I work in statistics, and probably you know that we were hit by the replication crisis hard, maybe 10-ish, 8 to 10 years ago. And so there's, in psychology, actually, there's a lot that has changed already. So many people do pre-registered reports and use open data and open code. So there's a lot of positive developments. There's also some, I don't know how to phrase it, like some wishes to include, and also practices to include open science and reproducibility practices more in like hiring decisions and different aspects like that. Or there's some journals that have badges for open science practices or reproducible practices. And like, this is now my personal opinion, not so much the opinion in the field, but what I see is that actually the kind of these doing open science or reproducible practices also becomes a metric very similar to the p-value, so maybe in line with what you were talking earlier today. So people try to get like these badges and then they publish their data, but it's not really accessible. So they do not comment on what the variables mean or whether this is like the original data or some process data. And so we kind of tend to get back to the same problems that we had before. And then what I see is what works really well is when researchers have the impression that doing these reproducible practices is actually a help in their daily work. So there's some people who say, for me, it's really good if I structure my whole projects in the beginning, then maybe later I deviate from the plan, because of course I cannot plan ahead, but that's okay. But it helps me to, I don't know, get collaborators on board because I know what will be missing later in the process, or it helps me to structure my resources, to plan ahead. And then also, I think that what is necessary is tools that really help to do these practices, and they need to be really accessible by people who are not experts in statistics or computational, I don't know, like computer science. So anything that is like automated reporting that is kind of integrated in a workflow that people already know or that is trained really well in also in academia, that's really helpful. So I think the key is really the attitude that people have towards how they work, and not so much how much we like incentivize these aspects. Sorry, this is not a question, but
Thanks. Very good. Very interesting. So that was basically more around making them realize that there is actually benefits from them on an everyday basis. Okay. Yeah, there's one more comment.
No, that just brought something back into my mind that happened this week. I'm organizing the reproducibility. Many of you probably are familiar with this concept, like this series in Zurich. And we had a speaker on Wednesday, where like two speakers actually, where they went through their reproducible workflow that they're using in their lab. So it was also more like related to social science, psychology. And then it was super structured and really, really great. I was super impressed at what they put together and like how they then onboard people. And it's so much easier to onboard newcomers. I mean, they have to get through all these steps, but then it's all written down and it's easy. And then I asked whether when they publish a paper, how are they talking about this process that they had this set up to get the credit for it, right? And then they just looked, no, we have never thought about it. And I was so impressed. So they really just did this for themselves and to have like, I'm doing good science because I follow all this process, and they're not doing it to get the credit for it, to get the badge or whatever. So I was very inspired by this. I would hope that there's more and more labs that are working like this.
Sounds good. Any more questions from the audience, maybe? Any questions online? Is anybody still online? Few people. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I know it's Friday evening, so I think we can also slowly maybe close. We don't need to go until the full hour necessarily. If there's no more questions, I really enjoyed it personally a lot today. I took a lot of notes, and I feel I learned a lot. So I want to thank all the speakers and of course also the audience in Basel and online for coming. And yeah, wishing you a lot of success with the Reproducibility Conference. That sounds really cool. I need to see when I have time to come as well, I think. And yeah, so wish you all a great weekend, and have a look at the other BBS events that are coming next week. Next week, there's something on data visualization, which could also be interesting. So lots of cool stuff in the pipeline there as well. Okay, so thanks everyone.